I'm curious if that's comparable to this sort of world, this culture of toxic fandom, where like if you make a movie, especially if you make a superhero movie, like you have great intentions, but there are always going to be a small yet vocal group of people there can kind of just be toxic.
I understand what you're saying, but when it comes to fans, it is a fan's right to have whatever opinion they want to have. And people are going to be upset because, especially when you're talking about books or games, because you're never going to be the exact person who they had in their head or who they played on Witcher 3, for example. I don't necessarily consider that toxic. I just consider that passionate.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Well, this week we've seen that Aftershock has declared bankruptcy, that there's a number of other publishers that are not paying their creators. We're seeing that comic book stores are struggling to make their money and having to do GoFundMes and are in thousands, tens of $1,000s of debt. Some need $80,000 to be made whole again from just the damage done over the last couple of years. We see that sites like ICV2, Comicron, are no longer reporting the monthly numbers like they used to, that the analysis that was done through these kind of small point-of-sale comic software packages that were not well established and very few stores actually use them, are not providing enough detail. The publishers are not giving out numbers anymore. We see that Diamond, the big question mark is how many publishers at this point owe Diamond money, and that tends to be quite a bit, and how many comic shops owe Diamond money, and how much money Diamond owes some of these people. Lots of people owing people money, lots of things going on. The troubling part, though, is if you go to the main websites of the comic news, if you go to CBR right now, you're going to be treated with, some basically them kind of walking away from a lot of comics and talking about the Warner Brothers reportedly begging the Joker director to run the new DC studios, Marvel unveiling the first look at Loki season 2, James Gunn rebooting the DCU, and more and more and more. Metal Hellsinger is a perfect Game Pass game. You can go kind of down the line. You actually have to search for a while. There's some manga news here. Here's Ray Fisher. Here's some stuff about Trolls, biggest plot holes and unanswered questions. I'm still scrolling to get to the actual comic news. Here's Steven Spielberg regretting Jaws' real-life impact on sharks. Remember, this is Comic Book Resources, the website. Here's Marvel Snap. Here's Suicide Squad Killed the Justice League movie. Here's another article about manga, Lord of the Rings. I did this as kind of a bit. Now I'm just kind of curious how far it has to go before we actually get to comic news. Finally got to it, and it's Aftershock declaring bankruptcy. Okay. Right under that is a website, an article. You can't make this up. Comics have always addressed political issues, and that's a good thing. Well, sure. Why not? That's what's important. If I go over to, Newsarama, I'm seeing some various news stories about who is Howard the Duck. First look at Ninja Turtles. Here's an article about somebody finding a clip from the Sally Jesse Raphael show about Gerard Way. If I go over to Bleeding Cool, the source of amazing comic journalism, we get stories about how Mark Miller has bought a pub that one of the contributors to Bleeding Cool, I think, might have a restraining order, is talking about going to. So we'll see how that all works out. And then some press releases for the new Predator, for what Batman with the Dr. Fate helmet on. And if you go over to Comics Beats, certainly we're going to see some information about comic books and this trouble about how shops are struggling a little bit, maybe a little humility from any of these sites talking about, hey, we've been promoting for years and years and years that the comic industry is going great and now all this stuff's going on. But sure enough, no, we've got some press releases. We do have the Aftershock news, of course, some other top comics for December. And then just kind of some general, some vague kind of pieces. There's something in here about toxic fandom. That's always nice. And we get that. So where do we have to go? How long does it take, or where do we have to go to get the comic news out there, to actually get somebody saying, hey, By the way, in the beat, right between the Get Your Trump, Homelander digital collectible cards now, and a photo gallery of Dave Stevens' documentary Kickstarter, is the news that Peter David, of course, has multiple strokes, currently hospitalized. This was made over 19 days ago. We don't actually have an update here on this, but we do have this website reporting from TMZ, who's covering this story. So that's super, just super. So what is it going to take to actually get somebody in the mainstream media to actually, point out that, hey, maybe this thing, this IP generator, this comic book business, the thing that we like to show in kind of TV shows. If we're doing the Big Bang Theory, we'd love to show the nerdy guys hanging out in a comic shop. Or if we're doing a movie that is set in the past, the kids are running around buying funny books off a spinner rack. Or, or hell, even the multi-billion-dollar MCU, which is heading to Phase 5. What about the source material for any of this? Is it worth a news story out there? Is it worth somebody going, hey, look at what's happened. We've got this major iconic piece of Western pop culture that seems to be suffering. We see stores having to beg for money. We see creators struggling to get paid. We see this huge crux. No matter where you fit on the general culture war angst in comic books, the fact that it's so heated, so intense, indicates that there's a problem. That Henry Cavill quote that's at the beginning of this video around, hey, there's still the customers and the fans. You got to just kind of at least settle down the fight at some point. You just can't war with them. That would be suicidal. That's not what he said, but that's what I'm saying. That's in effect what's going on there. But what is it going to take for some news agency and not one of these? Look, the Beat, Bleeding Cool, these places are completely co-opted at this point. They're not going to report anything remotely considering helpful to comics. They're not going to talk about the comics numbers have disappeared while simultaneously say that they're better than ever. We'll just wait for 6 months from now, a year from now, for another puff piece to come out saying that the comics business, which has grown to not just include YA and graphic novels and manga and digital, is also including school textbooks, because, if you close your eyes and kind of think hard enough, school textbooks are also kind of comics. So the business is bigger than ever. Never mind all those stores that are closing. What is it going to take for somebody to go, what, maybe maybe this part of Americana, this iconic thing, this field that we all love, maybe it's in some trouble, and maybe I ought to pay attention to why it is, rather than kind of like a bunch of seals just clapping and saying everything's okay. What's it going to take to get that kind of attention for somebody to really dig in and see what is wrong here? Well, I've got an idea. So clearly the truth is not in the mix, and clearly the various angst on social media is not the mix. Hell, everything's on fire simultaneously with social media, and people are too busy dunking on Elon. That's not going to do anything. And even though the movies and these billion-dollar IPs come from the comics, people are very quick to forget the comics existed. No, I think there's only one surefire thing that will get people to care about comics from the broader media, from the broader news, and really take a hard investigative look, really get to the bottom, not stop talking about it until the problems are solved. I think there's only one thing that is guaranteed to do that.
Well, we're waiting.
And that is for Donald Trump to make a comic book. That's right. So this is what I'm hoping. I want Donald Trump to actually buy a small comic publisher, or just make his own. He can call it MAGA Comics. He can call it I've Got Amazing Hair Comics. I don't care what you do. But what I want is for Donald Trump to put out a comic, and it could be called the Trumpinator, Super Trump, Trump and the Family of Trumps. You've been Trumped. I don't care what it is. But basically, a Trump comic book. And once he puts that out, I am convinced that finally, people will start looking into this business and will not be able to stop talking about it. Suddenly, the spotlight will swing back to comics, and we'll look at how some of these publishers are just living off of debt, and how creators can't stop torching everyone online, and that people aren't getting paid, and that there's the entire thing is a big Ponzi scheme to try and get a Netflix deal, and all the rest. I think that's the only way we're going to get that level of scrutiny, and people just relentlessly not shutting up about it and asking these questions. Why is this stuff hidden over here? Why is it hidden over there? The only way to do it is for Donald Trump to actually put out a comic. So good news, he's got those NFTs showing superhero Trump. So half the work is done already. Let's get a Trump comic book. If we do, I'm convinced that finally, people will stop being so positive about everything in comics, and a lot of these news agencies will finally start paying attention to it and maybe start looking into what's going on here. I think that's the only hope that we have. So there you go. Trump comics, the only thing that will get people to finally admit that maybe some things are wrong with comics. That's what I think it has to take. Am I wrong? The unfortunate reality is, if we want people to pay attention to something, to look critically at it, and actually call out a lot of the bullshit, then we're going to have to attach Trump's name to it. And then maybe some of these news agencies will actually start to care and do their fucking job. Thanks for listening.